Keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast on our Instagram handle at the Wolf Connection Pod, or email us your questions, comments, and guest ideas to podcast@wolfconnection.org. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kaufman. So as we head towards the end of the year, we are extremely excited, more so because of everything that's happening in Colorado with the Wolf Reintroduction, and really no better individual to talk to about this than now, as we were told just before we started this, he's the Wolf Conservation Program Manager for CPW out there. He is Eric Odell. Eric, really great to finally get to meet you, to speak with you, and really the culmination of all these efforts coming together and putting paws on the ground. How's everything going for you?
Yeah, great, John. Thanks. Things are going great. It's a pleasure to be able to spend some time with you guys this afternoon and tell you about where we are, where we've been, and where we hope to go in the next couple of months, and also in the next couple of years. This is a big effort. Feels like we've made met some major landmarks, but there's many more to still come.
Yeah, I mean, just give everybody an overall update where everything sits. If people have been paying attention, obviously it looks as though there was a deal reached between Colorado and Oregon to help with the acquirement, I guess, of the first 10 or so wolves for the reintroduction. Just give everybody an overall where everything sits as we sit here towards the end of 2023.
Yeah, sure. And in some ways, it's helpful just to look back and reflect at everywhere that we have been over the last several years. I mean, really, we wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for the citizens' initiative to gather signatures on the ballots, to get the petition to get the issue put on the ballot back in November of 2020. And so they were obviously very successful at that. They had many more signatures than were necessary. The vote was in November of 2020. It passed, and that turned that ballot language into state statute. And that's really what directs us to do as state employees, as a state wildlife agency, to do what we do. And so that began a real long process, a several year process, really, up until just this spring, to develop a plan. And there's a long effort. We can get into that a little bit later if you're real interested in that process. But developed a plan that was presented to our commission to reintroduce and manage wolves in Colorado, just like the statute required us to do. A few other wrinkles to that as well. And then after the plan was approved, we reached out to several states to see if we could get some wolves from them to establish this population here. And we've been really focused on the logistics of that for the last several months. So the commission approved the plan back in May of 23, and now we're headed towards this deadline within the statute to begin the process. Certainly not to finish it, but to begin it by the end of this calendar year, the end of December 2023. And so we've spent a lot of energy, thinking about all the different logistics. How do we get crews out to where we're going to get wolves from? How do we capture wolves? How do we transport them back to Colorado? And how do we release them? And all of that, and many details within all of that. So that's the big picture of it. We've had conversations with several states. Oregon is where we've landed. And so we're going to take up to 10 wolves is what they've agreed to allow us to take this season. So between December and into March, and we will start that effort towards, in a couple months now, a month and a half probably, we'll start into that and begin the process to try to restore a wolf population in Colorado.
So, I mean, is there a backstory for how it ended up being Oregon, or what was the process through which it became specifically Oregon? I'm sure you asked other states. What other states did you inquire about? And I mean, how did it end up that Oregon is the state and not others, or is it just simply, as the saying goes, throwing gum and seeing what sticks?
Yeah, no, it was lots of different conversations that happened. As soon as the wolf plan was approved by the commission, which also happened to be, I think, day 2 or day 3 of our new director's tenure. He was just hired on at the very beginning of May, so he had 2 days to get his feet under him. Once we had a wolf plan approved by the commission and we knew what was going to go forward, he sent letters to his counterparts, to the directors of the other Western wildlife agencies, and making that request to see if they would be willing to be part of those conversations about being source sites for wolves. We got responses from several of them. Several states just decided that it wasn't in their interest to participate in this, and provided some of their justification, whether it was concerns about how wolf reintroduction in Colorado might affect themselves, as in the case of Wyoming, or just other interests and experiences that they reflected on as they considered what wolves meant to their states. So we had expected it to have some challenging conversations, and we certainly did. We reached out both to all of the Northern Rocky states. Idaho, Montana, Wyoming had let us know early on that they were not interested in this. And then also Oregon and Washington. And Oregon just at this point has proved to be the most fruitful conversation, but there are other conversations that are still happening. So, this is what we've got lined out for the first part of year one. And we'll pursue these other opportunities as that timeline goes on. And we're, like I said, this is a multi-year effort, and we will have several years, several different conversations with different states, and tribes have also been part of these conversations as well. So we'll see how that all pans out. But what we have confirmed and firmed up at this point in time is working with the state of Oregon.
That's great. It's cool that like everywhere we go now, we start seeing a lot of tribal involvement, and that's just, I mean, that's awesome. I didn't know how involved they'd be in this particular part of it. Can you speak to what the transport's going to look like?
Yeah, it's wolf reintroduction is very similar to all of the kinds of wildlife projects that we do, right? And as Colorado Parks and Wildlife, we've been involved in a lot of really exciting things. I personally have been involved in a lot of really exciting things with our lynx reintroductions and black-footed ferrets and lesser prairie chickens. Some fish species haven't been as involved in those. Historically, otter populations and reintroductions, all that different kind of stuff. And generally what it means is finding a source site. We've accomplished that. Figuring out how to capture those animals and then transporting them to Colorado. So we're now in that phase. We've got the source site identified. The winter time is the best time to capture wolves, and so it's usually done with helicopter capture, and so that's what we're focusing on right now, establishing some contracts with helicopter capture companies in Oregon. We will generally the ideal conditions are when there's snow on the ground. We can use that to track the animals, to find where they are. Many of the packs in Oregon already have collars on them, and so we'll use that information, that tool to locate the packs. They cover these huge territories, and in the wintertime they do tend to be a bit more focused in terms of space, but it's a big area, and so trying to find them, and some of the staff at Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife are already doing some of that scouting out for us right now. Then once we locate the animals, send the helicopter up and dart the animals, maybe net gun them, but generally with this wintertime capture, we're looking at darting, and then bringing them back into a processing station where we will weigh and measure and put collars on, collect tissue samples, collect blood samples, do all the kinds of things that we do to understand the health of the animals. We will do a health check, and we don't want animals that are injured or super old or super young. We kind of want the animals that are right in that early lifespan kind of thing. So wolves just biologically they disperse when they get to that 2 to 3 year time frame, and that's really kind of what we're trying to mimic with the reintroduction here. We're not trying to, in the case of Oregon, they've asked us not to take breeding animals from the source population. So we'll take hopefully a 50-50 sex ratio of males to females in that 2 to 5 year old age range. Healthy animals, we don't want animals with broken legs, broken limbs, or missing canines or missing eyes, things like that. We want animals that are healthy. They're going to be able to act naturally on the landscape and depredate prey on native ungulates rather than livestock and things like that. So we've made an intentional effort to not take animals from packs that are known to be regular depredators as well. And so all of those different kind of factors come in as we capture the animals. They'll be processed, they'll be treated for some disease issues as well, and health checks. And then they're loaded into a crate, an aluminum crate, which is going to be either loaded onto a truck in a trailer and transported back to Colorado, or more ideally will be put on a small plane and flown back to Colorado, back to a local airstrip, and then transported to the release site and released there.
Wow. So when you're talking about soup to nuts, this is clearly a multi-day process, correct? This is obviously not something that happens in one day. What's from darting to processing to paw on the ground in Colorado, what's roughly the the trajectory there in terms of time that you guys are taking with each wolf that gets
Yeah,
butchered?
great question, and some uncertainty in it, and a lot of it depends just on timing. There are scenarios where it could happen really quickly. I mean, if we're successful in capturing animals early in the morning, we can get them to the airstrips by early day, or late morning, early afternoon, and get them in the planes, and those planes up in the air and back to Colorado by early evening. That might be a strategy that might happen. We may need to keep animals in the crates overnight in some locations to do that as well. But we're really focusing on this on animal welfare issues. We want to handle the animals as calmly and as efficiently as we can. We want to transport them as calmly and efficiently as we can. The airplane transport is far easier, both in time and probably in stress too. And so, really trying to do this as quickly as possible, get them established, and released back into Colorado as quickly as possible. So it's probably not multi days, but it may be an overnight to keep animals in crates, but hopefully not much more than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, what are you drawing on from your experience, like you said, with other reintroductions when you talk about lynx and black-footed ferret, specifically for this? Because you've been in Colorado, for a few decades. You've really captured. I keep reading articles about how everybody is really thrilled that you're the one that's at the helm of this from the beginning. What are you taking from all of your experience to transition into something where we're talking about a species that is frankly larger than a ferret or a lynx, and make sure that everything goes so smooth?
Yeah, thanks for the comment, the compliment. It's I've had a lot of experience in the whole agency. There's many staff in the agency that have had a lot of experience on this in animal handling and animal transport, probably collectively much more experience than I have, for sure. And so we're relying on the team that we've developed, and the team includes veterinarians, it includes biologists, it includes our local area wildlife managers and district wildlife managers. And so we've got a whole bunch of experience in doing that kind of work. We don't have any experience in capturing, well, very limited experience in capturing and handling wolves. We've had a few wolves in Colorado that we've been able to get hands on. But really, what we've been able to do is partner, and we've developed really good relationships with others that have had that experience. I had the good fortune to be able to go up to Yellowstone National Park and work with the biologists up there with Doug Smith and Dan Staler and others, to get some, a week and a half of real hands-on experience handling wolves and capturing wolves, and talking with them. In the whole planning process, stepping back to discussing about that, we convened two separate groups, and one of which was a technical working group. And on that group, we had several people that were directly involved with the reintroductions of wolves to Yellowstone and central Idaho in the mid 90s. And so just working from their expertise and working learning from their experiences in terms of what worked, what didn't work, how to plan for all of these different kinds of contingencies. You have all of these best laid plans, and it all works great until something doesn't work great. And then you've got to be, adaptable and go to plan B or C or W, maybe even. So, there's a lot of years of experience amongst all of wildlife professionals and amongst wolf biologists to rely on to think about, what did you guys learn from your experiences? How do we do this, both from the immediate wolf handling side of things to the wolf transport side of things? And some things have changed. There's a lot that's different between the mid 90s and here we are in 2023 and into the future. So, some things worked that were easier to do then than they are now, and some things we have more opportunities to do now too. So it's just a trying to take as much as you can from those who've led the path before us.
This might be too ambiguous of a question, but I'm curious as you're speaking, what do you expect to see within the first 72 hours of wolf releases? Like, what are the first courses of action if you're a wolf that's just been let out of a cage in a new place?
Great question, and a big uncertainty, and a question that we get asked a lot. People would like to know where the animals are going to go and what they're going to do, and we don't know. We're not going to do a soft release. There's two different kind of strategies for release of reintroductions. One is a soft release, where the animals are kept in an acclimation pen. They're given some time to kind of get their wits about them, get their bearings. That's a very expensive way to go about it. It's what they did do in Yellowstone for the wolf reintroduction there. They get the wolves into good body condition. They're fed. They learn how to hunt, and take some of that edge off of what they've just been through in terms of the capture and transport and everything. That's soft release. Hard release is kind of the opposite. You bring that aluminum crate that they're transferred in, and then bring it to where you're going to be, and then open the crate and let them go. And that's the strategy that we're going to take. A variety of reasons as to why we're doing that versus the soft release. For one thing, that building a soft release pen that's going to be big enough is very expensive endeavor. It takes a lot of time, staff time to build it. It takes a lot of staff time to protect it and guard it while there are animals in there. And fundamentally, what we learned, and this was a question that we asked that technical working group, both of those strategies worked. So the soft release strategy was very effective. Animals moved a little bit less, shorter distances than they did with the hard release strategy, but both were totally functional. In both populations established, good, robust populations in both of those areas, both in central Idaho and obviously dispersed out of there, and in Yellowstone. So that's the strategy. We'll release the animals. All of the animals that we release will have a GPS collar on them, and so those will be programmed to give us locations as to where the animals are going on a relatively short time frame. So we'll know, not certainly minute by minute or anything like that, but within hours or something like that. Based on what the other experiences were in Idaho and Yellowstone, we expect those animals to move, and who knows which direction, northeast,
Wow.
southwest.
Yeah, true.
Who knows how far? It could be, several of the animals that were released in Idaho moved 30 to 60 miles in a matter of weeks. And so they can move obviously big distances in short periods of time. Whether they stick around or not remains to be seen. Well, that's a big question to ask.
Wow. Like, why wouldn't they stick around? Well, I mean, in general, do wolves that are released together stay together, or is that not been studied?
Good question. We'll find some of that out.
Really?
We're gonna. One of the things I didn't mention too much about in terms of where we're getting wolves from, like from Oregon, we'll get 10 wolves this year. They won't all be from the same pack. They'll probably be from several different packs. And the release strategies will vary based on which animals we have in hand and the sex ratios. We would like animals that are not related to pair up and to breed and establish their own packs in Colorado. And so wolves are incredible at finding each other, for sure. I mean, we've had several wolves that have come down into the state, and in one case successfully reproduced, and those are two different individuals that migrated all the way down through Wyoming, came to Colorado, and somehow found each other, using scent and howling and all these different kinds of things. They see the landscape in pretty interesting ways. And so, we're not too concerned about the really precise location as to where they're released. Wolves will find each other on the landscape. That's just the way that they work.
Let's say that you release two wolves close to each other, and one very quickly kills another wolf, and now you're down to 9 wolves. Do you go back to the drawing board on where you get more? Is Oregon going to give you more wolves at that point, or how does that kind of thing work if there's pack, well, not pack at that point, individual conflict very quickly?
Yeah, great question. We'll learn a lot. We'll learn a lot about what works and what doesn't work. I don't know that Oregon's agreed to give us is 10 wolves this year.
Okay.
So I think that's the limit there. As an example of learning as we do with the lynx reintroduction that we began decades ago, back in 1999. We initially started with the hard release strategy with lynx, brought them down from Canada and Alaska, released them, and we had really, really high mortality of lynx. It wasn't lynx on lynx, but it was starvation issues was primarily the issue. And so we changed our protocols, and we kept lynx in our pens, got them in a really, really good body condition, released them, and survival vastly improved. And so it's just some minor tweaks in some of those protocols for the lynx reintroduction that really made that program a success. I don't think wolves need that. I don't think that they're going to need to be brought into good body condition. They're going to be in good body condition as we bring them in. But there's, how they use the landscape. There's the potential of all different kinds of mortality sources for wolves, and so we'll have to address all of those as they come along and see if there are ways that we as wildlife managers can change the way that we're doing the release actions and all the different transport actions. If we find problems, we'll be adaptable and we'll solve those problems and change so that in the future years we're going to be able to do this and work towards that ultimate goal.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's an ever evolving process. I know. Yeah, it's just there's so many things. I mean, talk about the Eric. You were saying just even about the process with the technical working group and the other groups there. How, from your perspective, how did everything seem to come together in terms of the melding of ideas, the melding of different people from all these different places to really drive and make this as successful as possible? Because we spoke with Mike Phillips very early on, I think either right after the vote happened, and obviously as we've been charging towards this end date, what's it been like for you and CPW and everybody else to really gain all this knowledge from all these different working groups, from all these different people in all these different situations? How has that helped you feel as we near pause on the ground in Colorado?
It's been great. I mean, it's one of those things where we really couldn't have gotten to where we are without all of the, not only the technical expertise that we've gotten from that technical working group, but also the public input as well. We had parallel to that technical working group, there was a stakeholder advisory group that we convened, and that represented everybody from the wolf advocates to um, county commissioners, livestock producers, hunters and outfitters were represented on there. Tribal representatives were on that group as well. In that first meeting of that stakeholder advisory group, I remember it very distinctly. We walked into that room and you could feel the tension in there. There was, people felt threatened, people felt huge opportunity. Some people felt as though they had won a big fight and now here we go. And it was tense for sure. And we spent a lot of time not talking about wolves and talking about people and where things were coming from and how to address concerns and how we were going to function, how that group was going to function as a group and so on. So it was very, very tense. And by the end of that process, it was probably an 18-month process where this group met throughout the state of Colorado in person. We met, this was all through the COVID pandemic. There was one meeting in particular that we had to resort to a virtual meeting, but otherwise everything was in person, which I think was a really valuable aspect of that. And they were open to the public, took public comment at those meetings, took public comment throughout the process at our commission meetings as well. And so we really got to understand what the concerns were and what the fear about having wolves on the landscape was, what the opportunity about having wolves on the landscape was, positive and negative on both. And that process, going through that process was really, really helpful. We also had all of these conversations. I've developed, I'd say, very close personal friendships and professional relationships with all my counterparts in throughout the West that are managing wolves. And I've got them. I can call anybody up and say, "Hey, I'm dealing with this. What do you think about that? What do you think about this?" And just have these sounding boards that all offer different perspectives. And so that's really, really helpful. As we've gone through this whole process, and especially with that stakeholder group, we worked towards consensus. We would try to seek consensus where everybody was happy or everybody could survive or live with a particular decision or direction that we were headed. That's a really hard thing to do. And in a lot of cases, we were not able to get entirely to consensus on those. And I should say too that both the stakeholder group and that technical group were not the decision-making factors. Those were just advisory bodies to us as staff as we put that plan together. But when we did put that plan together and presented it to the commission, we presented a draft plan in December that began a really intensive public process in January and February. Rewrote the plan in March and April. When we presented it in May, our commission, which is our governor appointed policy body, took that plan and listened to it, listened to the presentation, and then unanimously supported the plan. And so if you had asked me in November of 2020 or December of 2020, shortly after the vote happened, what kind of agreements we could get to, where we would ultimately align, where we'd ultimately arrive when we came up with a wolf plan so that we could reintroduce plans, there's no way I would have said that our commission, which is a very diverse group. I mean, there's wolf advocates represented in there, and not just wolf advocates, but kind of a non-consumptive user to the hunter, to the agricultural producer, to many other perspectives that are represented on our commission. They unanimously supported the plan that was presented, and that was I think a real testament to the effort that we put together to develop that plan and to consider all of the various perspectives. Not any, I don't think anybody is entirely happy with everything that's in the plan, and that's a good thing. I think that really shows that we've listened to a lot of different perspectives. We've got a plan together that I think will establish a population of wolves in the state, and it will also address some of the issues that come up with having wolves in the state too. And so it's been a big effort, and it's due in large part to all of the different relationships that we've established with the technical group, with the stakeholder group, counterparts in other states, internal teams, and all of the different groups that have been part of these conversations.
So in terms of things like mitigation tools or tactics for, I guess, the communities and populations that are going to be most affected by the wolf reintroduction, is it a true statement that those communities, those populations, are more prepared now than they were before the plan was the plan was passed, the stakeholder advisory groups, the public comments, et cetera? How has there been pre-planning for kind of those types of things, mitigation tools, going out to properties or well, ranch lands, I guess, and preparing folks for challenges that may arise? Or is that also going to be kind of just learning as we go and sort of on the fly mitigation?
A bit of both. I think, we know a fair bit about how to get ahead of the game, and we've done that. We've hired one conflict management specialist right now, and plans to hire several more, 3 or 4 or 5 more of those, depending on how things go in time. But we've got a staff member, Adam Baca is his name. He came from Montana. He had a lot of experience dealing with, trying to mitigate conflict. We never say prevent conflict.
Sure.
We're never going to get to that point.
Right.
Try to minimize that as much as you can. And so he's got some really great people skills. That's a really important aspect to this kind of work. He can reach out and establish those relationships with producers, as well as good technical skills. And he knows, different kinds of ways to make implement different kinds of tools to try to minimize that conflict. You asked if they're better prepared now than they were at the beginning of the plan. Absolutely, producers are way better prepared. Not totally adequately, though, I think they would probably say. I mean, I think there's never enough materials, there's never enough expertise, there's never enough staff time to get everything out. Part of the plan of our wolf restoration plan, does describe a conflict mitigation program, minimization program that Adam is working on. And so we're working really hard to develop and stockpile tools and materials and things like that we can deploy where appropriate. It's not necessarily appropriate for every producer to have miles and miles of flattery, the fencing with a little flagging on it. But in certain circumstances, in certain places, it makes a lot of sense to deploy those kinds of tools. And so a lot of that is stockpiling the tools, and then a lot of it also is the education and getting out and talking with producers and building that trust and having that those kinds of relationships with them, so that when they start to see wolf sign in their areas, whether it's tracks or scat or whatever, or even seeing the wolves themselves, they can be in touch with our local staff, and then those staff can then develop a really customized plan for that particular property in terms of what makes sense for how to work with those producers to minimize the amount of conflict that they might experience.
Are the conversations different for producers that have fenced land or private land that's being constantly monitored, and those producers that have their cattle on public land, for example?
Yeah, I mean, there's different tools for different circumstances, right? I mean, the flattery works really, really well for these confined areas where there is fenced around areas. Flattery is not an appropriate tool for open range grazing a lot. There are other tools that would be used in those circumstances. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I mean, is that all of these, there is no cookbook for how to minimize wolf conflict. We've got a book. I forget exactly what the title of it is. I should know, but it's kind of instead of the cookbook, it's the shopping list of what you might use, and so then you've got to kind of customize it to your particular circumstances and what you're experiencing.
Yeah, it seems. It doesn't seem. It is. Transparency is a major tool that it really seems from jump that Colorado, CPW, all of you have used to your benefit, I think, in having these open conversations, these technical working groups, the SAG, public events, public forums. Stephen and I and Wolf Connection were part of the one in Aspen with living coexistence with wolves. So it just really seems that the transparency aspect is very much at the forefront for Colorado. How is it mostly been a positive impact? I mean, you've basically said as much, but what have you been seeing that as you say, you're able to go out to these properties, you're able to talk with these individuals from all different groups, like you said, wolf advocacy, ranching, producing, whatever it may be. Have the overall feelings been positive, and obviously, or is there still some kickback even with the transparency of what's happening and the tools that can be used?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is really, really hard to generalize, right? I mean, there are livestock producers that are totally reluctant, totally hesitant, and non-supportive of having wolves, and there are those producers that are interested in the challenge, or interested in the opportunity of what it might be. And so there's no way to say somebody that says that livestock producers hate wolves is wrong, right? There are that you cannot generalize that way. Same with hunters. There are not all hunters that think wolves are bad and going to compete with the ungulates. There are some hunters that are also very much looking forward to having that additional challenge potentially of having wolves on the landscape too. And so generalizing that way is really, really challenging, really difficult. We've worked really hard to say who we are, why we're doing, and work with all of those potentially affected communities about what it's going to mean to have wolves on the landscape. And so I think many people appreciate that we're doing it in that regard. It's not a, I mean, the thing about it is that this is not unlike all of the other reintroductions that we've been part of, this is not a CPW led effort or initiated effort. It is a CPW led effort, but not an initiated effort. When we reintroduced lynx, it was us coming to the southwestern Colorado's where all those releases happen, saying, hey, we're the state wildlife agency, we want to do this, we want to help restore, you know, reinforce this population, so this is what we're going to do. With wolves, it's different, right? Having the vote happen it changes the conversation quite a bit, and so it's not us initiating this effort, it's us leading this effort. And so now let's work together to figure out the best ways to do that, and to address those concerns. And so we've been very, very intentional about being as honest and straightforward and transparent as we can be about all of these different kinds of issues, knowing full well that we're talking to people that may be very, very opposed, very scared about having wolves on the landscape. Some of those fears are well mounted. Some of them are probably based on exaggerated fears as well. And so I think that's part of the conversation too, is trying to the whole varying perspectives of what it's going to mean to have wolves is very, very challenging. And so just having those open, honest conversations is really important. And I'm not going to say we're 100% successful with there are some that are just it's a real turnoff to
Yeah.
for us even to be involved.
Yeah, exactly. I think John's right too. Transparency has been one of definitely the defining characteristics of all of our conversations with CPW about this reintroduction. Obviously, we really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody does. So I know that when we talked to Matt Yamashita, he was talking about the concerns about like a really hard winter in Colorado, and how maybe it impacted ungulate populations, and he was describing all sorts of things like elk ending up on roads that are 10-foot snowbanks and getting hit by trucks, not just necessarily natural causes, but just in general the direct and indirect effects of really hard winters. Has there been, I mean, obviously, and that's nobody's fault, right? I mean, the reintroduction concept passed, and now we just happen to have had a really hard winter. Is there any conversations about or concerns about releasing wolves back onto the landscape the same year that follows a very hard winter that was supposedly hard on ungulate numbers?
Yeah, it's a good question, and you're right. I mean, that last winter was a historic winter in terms of snowfall, and the length of the season, and the quality of the snow, and just kind of making it impossible for animals to get out. And we did suffer really, really high losses in very particular areas of the state of our native ungulate populations. It didn't happen. So it did happen for sure, but it did not happen throughout all of Western Colorado. There are lots of areas that had a typical winter. And so the areas that we happen to be looking for our releases are those areas that did not have that major winter. And so, it's an important thing for us to consider. We want to release animals into areas where there are good ungulate populations, elk and deer populations in the wintertime. And so that's part of our, as we map out where these releases will happen, as we look at, where is the good winter range, and that's informed from historic data as well as contemporary data. What are the current conditions, and so on. So we have some limitations where we have to do our releases within, but um, we're looking at areas that are hopefully not going to have as dramatic and harsh a winter as that extreme northwest part of the state did last year. And so just to be clear, that's not where we're going to be releasing wolves in that area, because for a variety of reasons, but partly because of just the conditions that are out there right now.
I assume one of the other reasons was proximity to other state lines. Was that considered?
Yeah, so we, in our plan, outlines the map. That there's a couple of maps that are in the plan that are pretty interesting to look at. We first took on an effort, or some other researchers took on an effort to map out ecological suitability for wolves, and really that's looking at deer native ungulate populations seasonally, so especially in the wintertime, since that's when the releases are happening. And then also looked at conflict risk, and where there's a lot of livestock grazing, things like that happening. And so you can look at those seasonally, you can look at those throughout the whole western part of the state. And so we use that to kind of big picture focus in on what parts of the state have really good ecological suitability and really hopefully low conflict risk. By the statute that passed, we have to do all the releases west of the Continental Divide. So everything is going on the west slope of Colorado. And then we can put a constraint on ourselves, saying that we don't want to release animals within 60 miles of Wyoming, 60 miles of Utah, 60 miles of New Mexico, and the tribal lands also requested that same buffer as well. And so we've focused in quite a bit the landscape that we're under consideration for releases. And the reason that we put that 60-mile buffer on there is largely coming back to that question that you had asked earlier about what are animals going to do, where are they going to move, and that's what the data showed from the Idaho releases and Yellowstone releases, is that animals can move, and generally in that 60 to 70-mile range is might be expected. So that buffer, one of the really important things I try to communicate when talking about that, is that buffer doesn't mean that wolves will not be tolerated in that area. In fact, wolves will be tolerated anywhere in Colorado, up to the state lines, east and west of the Continental Divide. It's just that we have to do the releases in that particular area, just to really protect that investment. It takes a lot of energy to go, like we were talking about, to capture and transport and release animals. And if they were to go into Wyoming or Utah or New Mexico, those states have expressed a lack of interest in that. And so we really want to protect that investment. That's why we put that buffer on there.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but the buffer is that seems like a solid idea. What has the input been like? I know we touched on it briefly when we were talking about the technical working group, the tribes input, because we came from a wolf symposium or a wolf summit in Montana where it really seemed as though everyone's trying to get tribal voices involved more so than probably in previous maybe in the previous reintroduction. I can't speak to that fully, but just now it really seems to be at the forefront, especially things going on in Minnesota, in Wisconsin, really getting the tribal leaders involved about their feelings about wolves, about the meaning of wolves, about them having on the landscape. What is that? How is that impacted really the process here, one way or the other?
Yeah, great question. In my experience, prior to working with wolves, I had no experience working with tribes. It just had never come up in any of the other work that I had done. And along the same lines as you can't generalize and say that all hunters hate wolves or all hunters love wolves. You can't say that same thing about tribes. Every tribe has a different perspective and a different interest
Right.
in how wolf management should happen or could happen. The Nez Perce tribe, it was intimately involved with the releases in Idaho. They were
Yep.
very uh, crucial to all of that happening in the mid 90s. And so, that as an example, they've been very pro wolf throughout all of those discussions. We had a tribal representative, not a tribal representative, but a representative from the tribe, a non-tribal member, on the stakeholder advisory group. We've held several different tribal consultations, one-on-one or group to group with the Southern Utes and the Ute Mountain Utes in southwestern Colorado. And their general interest, and it would be an interesting conversation to have directly with them. And I hate to generalize as to where they're coming from, but they've expressed concern about what it means, what it's going to mean to have wolves on the landscape. And so we've worked to try to address some of those concerns, and they're working as well with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because of that sovereign nation kind of status that they have. And so it's not a universal all tribes love wolves kind of perspective. In fact, that's not what we've experienced with the Ute tribes in Colorado. There's some reluctance and some concerns there too.
What has been the hardest part of preparing for this reintroduction, that you can tell from the scientific kind of context, meaning excluding the social dynamics part and the tough conversations with producers, excluding those, because I think unanimously when we ask this question, it's generally that part. It's trying to it's having tough conversations with people, and obviously we understand that. But other than that, what has been really the hardest part of preparing for this reintroduction?
A good, really, really interesting question because, like I said earlier, a wildlife reintroduction is similar no matter what it is. Yeah, you're capturing animals, collaring animals, transporting them, and so on. There's a lot of logistics that are challenging with wolves. Um, just the handling of them, the transporting of them, putting them in crates, getting those crates back and forth to wherever they need to be. It's a lot of those kinds of logistical challenges. Um, um, Finding release sites, it all, I mean, all of the challenges really kind of come back to those social and political concerns. From a wildlife handling perspective, there's nothing that's all that challenging, short of just the logistical challenges that come along with it.
Yeah, I'm just it's yeah, like you said, everything, like Steven was saying, everything comes back to the social tolerance aspect of a lot of these. And it seems as when we're talking about this, and like I said, the transparency has been huge because we follow CPW. We look at the conversations that happen when there's a post about the management plan comes out, and then you go into the comments, and
The
obviously
comments get wild.
people are
there.
people. Comments get wild, but I think just steadfastly though, and again, always correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but really it just seems that CPW have their ducks sort of in a row in that this is how we're explaining things. This is what's been proposed and agreed upon in X, Y, and Z. And it, again, I think just the transparency of answering even and diving into the comment section of anything like this, it is always it's a coin flip. You just never know how it's going to go. And I think Stephen, I think it was a great question. Is that, yeah, and for you to say it always comes back to the social tolerance of the political angles. It just does it put you all who are doing the actual scientific work, the actual capturing of the animals, releasing the animals, monitoring the animals, in a situation that is foreign to you all, or is it something that you've dealt with in other situations that you can pull from?
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting idea. We've um, well, what I can say is that we wolf monitoring, wolf management is new to us for sure, and that's going to create some all different kinds of conversations. We've worked really hard to develop a good team of CPW staff to accomplish this and to get towards this. I mentioned Adam's name before. Adam Baca is our conflict specialist. We've hired Ellen Brandell as our wolf researcher. She's come on just in the last year or so, and she's getting her research program up and running, looking at a bunch of different things, looking at wolf life history kinds of things, looking at wolf prey interactions, predator prey interactions, looking at wolf livestock interactions, and really coming up with some very creative things. No data, no results to show at this point in time, of course, but really developing a really good plan for what that's going to look like. We've also just in the last month or so hired on Brenna Cassidy, who's I think has spoken to you guys in the past as well. She comes from the University of Montana, just finishing up her PhD, and she's hired on as our wolf monitoring and data manager position. So we've got people that have years and years of experience handling, monitoring, researching wolves and wolf issues. And so I'm sure we'll run into challenges and problems as a new program always does, but we're doing our absolute best to put together a team of people that are fun to be around, really fun to work with, and really diligent and smart people that we can really expect some really great things to come from too. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of challenges And that's just, and I should back up and say that that's just who we've hired on to focus specifically on wolves, but we're also tasking all of our existing staff, all of our biologists, all of our game wardens, our district wildlife managers, and all of those that have many other responsibilities are gaining new expertise and new responsibilities in there too. And I think if anything, that might be part of the biggest challenge is getting the whole agency up to speed and understanding what this means. And it's certainly a new chapter in terms of what the agency is focused on. And so making it so that people are comfortable, staff are comfortable talking about wolves and wolf management and where we are with things is really important. And so we're spending a lot of energy on that as well in terms of getting that all of that specific wolf team as well as all of the other internal groups that are established to be comfortable about where we're going with things and know if they don't know where the right information is, where to go to get that information.
Yeah, you guys have some crazy smart folks on your team. We've just keep hearing names of people getting on board, and we've spoken to most of them, and they're just, I mean, the brightest of the bright. So we're it's awesome to hear that. So you were saying there's no when you're referring to Ellen, you said there's no research to show yet, but when there is, where can people expect to see it? Where can they find that type of research as it's ongoing?
Yeah, there. I mean, we have our CPW website has a research page on there. She'll publish, as it's the whole research process as data are collected, analyzed, reported on, and then published. All of those publications will be referenced on that website, as well as just the scientific literature that you're all probably well familiar with as well. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a long process, but there's with just the year in and no, only a few animals, a few wolves in the state. There haven't been real robust research projects started yet, but like I say, yeah, give it some time, and she'll put together some great results.
We'll post everything that comes out too that we get.
Great.
Yeah, obviously. Great. I don't think we've really asked you, Eric, because you've been doing this, all these other introductions. What makes this different or not for you? And how is this sitting with you now that, again, we're talking about end of year coming down to actually, again, having wolves released? What has this been like for you, if you can sit back and take a breath and sort of feel into it? And what does this mean for you?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to reflect. It's been a fast-paced 3 years, right? If you look back to
Yeah.
it was November of 2020, almost 3 years ago,
Wow.
almost to the
So
day
fast.
of when the vote passed. And when just before the vote, there had been lots of polling and suggested that it was really, really a high support throughout the state. And it turned out not to be quite as high, but it still did pass. And I remember, texting back and forth with my internal core team and saying, "Oh my gosh, here we go! It's passed, and get ready." And I had no idea what the next 3 years was going to bring. And it's been a real education in um, so many different aspects of it. I mean, the wolf handling side of things, the how to run facilitated meetings, how to try to solicit public input from all of these different really really opinionated sources, the political involvement, the really concerns at all different kinds of levels, uh, at the very local level to the very highest levels. And so there's lots of education that's come from that. Lots of policy education. We haven't talked much about the Fish and Wildlife Service, but we've work with them on developing a 10J rule and some of those things that are going to give us some more management flexibilities. So an education in the legal side of things and the policy side of things. So it's been a lot and at times really really trying. And you read some of the comments online and you get a little discouraged by the lack of support or the lack of interest. And then you have great successes and you get the plan approved by the commission in a unanimous way, and that's a real boost too. And so it's been a lot, and we've developed some really strong teams and internally, and a core team that I've got that really just has helped navigate all of the different challenges that are there. So here we are, 2 months almost to the day before the deadline comes. We will meet that deadline. I'm not concerned about that. We will have wolves on the ground before December 31st, and there's a lot to do in the next 2 months, but we'll get there. And it's an honor to have been found myself in this position and to be part of this whole project and to have led certain aspects of it. It's been really really interesting. It's going to be a relief when we open those first cages, because it's going to take a lot of some of these pressures off, I think. But it's also not the end of it either. I mean, it's like I said, this is a multi-year effort. We're going to be doing this for the next 3 to 5 years, probably, and 10 to 15 wolves a year. And so there's a long term. Each one of these different phases feels like a major point of accomplishment, and it is important to sit back and reflect and think about what it took to get to that point, and then to get ready for that next phase. And so that's where we are right now, getting ready for these reintroduction efforts, and then do that for several years, and then getting ready for wolf management and the ongoing monitoring and documenting how wolves use the landscape and distribute and disperse all around Colorado. And it's going to be fascinating times. And yeah, a very historical thing for Colorado, a very historical thing for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and I'm really proud to have been part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean, you're still doing. I mean, talk about if you want, because you did bring it up, and we didn't touch on it. What are some of the policy things as you head into, like you said, this 3 to 5 year period, wolves being reintroduced, and then we get to the management stage, which I think, again, when people look in hindsight, again, like you just said, the first 3 years of this, from November of 2020 to now, have sort of flew by. And now, who knows, the next 3 to 5 could fly by, and then we get to the management stage. What are some of the policy things that are, I guess, in talks? I don't know if they're firm when we ultimately probably get to that. Is there, and I might have asked this before, and I don't know if it was, put in stone yet. Is it a number? Is it in terms of like pack dynamics? Are we talking about pack size, overall population? What's really the goal, the future end goal here for Colorado as we look at wolves re-entering the landscape through this reintroduction process?
Yeah, lots of different policy aspects. I think the one to focus on is working with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the federal status of wolves, which has been pretty interesting. I mean, wolves in Colorado are federally endangered. Just north of me, I mean, here in Fort Collins, just north of me, 40, 50 miles into Wyoming, they're not listed at all. They're under state management. So that creates some different challenges. So as a federally endangered species, of course, take is prohibited, meaning all kinds of take, not just lethal take, but harming, harassing, all the different kinds of and some of the tools that we rely on for those conflict minimization tools could be classified as take as well. And so what we've really worked on with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they've led this process because it is a federal process, is the establishment of what's called the 10J rule. It's an experimental, non-essential experimental designation for wolves in Colorado, and that relaxes some of those take prohibitions, and in very limited circumstances allows livestock producers to lethally remove wolves. But it also provides a lot more flexibility for them to to use some of these other tools to try to minimize that conflict. That's really important for wolves. In fact, all wolf restoration projects have used 10J, whether it's the Northern Rockies populations or the Mexican wolf population, unique subspecies down in Arizona, New Mexico, and in Mexico. All of those populations are established under this 10J rule. And so we've worked really hard to get that established. And it's not effective yet today, but we're told in very short order it will be, prior to our reintroductions happening. And so that's been the kind of the big policy education and working through that whole we had to go through NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act, and environmental impact statements, and that whole parallel process to our wolf planning process has been pretty interesting. You asked about how do we know when we've been successful? When is the wolf program a success? We do not have it. Very importantly, we do not have a population objective in the plan. We don't say we get to this population and we're done and we're transitioning into a regulated hunting season or anything like that. The hunting is not in this plan at all. We do not have wolf hunting in any form, shape, or imagination in the current wolf restoration and management plan. We do have goals to downlist and delist from their state list of endangered species. It's not a federal recovery plan, so there's no what we do in terms of restoring animals might influence the Fish and Wildlife Service's determination on the status of wolves as a whole. But we have a responsibility as the state wildlife agency to maintain our own threatened and endangered species list, a state list. And so we do have our own goals in there for what downlisting from the state endangered to state threatened and what delisting looks like for wolves. And that's about 200 animals. And so when we get to that, they will be delisted from their state list. They'll still be classified as a non-game status species. And so there's that there's hundreds and hundreds of species that are classified as non-game species, and just means it's another one of those species that we manage. And so that's where we're headed in terms of how to achieve success. And I think, ultimately the self-sustaining population is the big goal. And we think that when we're at 200, that's not a population maximum at all. It's probably a population minimum. Once we'd like to keep the species off the list. There's lots of reasons to do that. And so that's kind of our primary target in terms of achieving success.
For you, what's I know you said the moment when the cage doors are open is when that sort of relief is going to, the first breath of relief. What'll be your role as we get towards those days? Are you going to be in the helicopter and the transport? What is your role going to be when we get to those first couple of releases?
Yeah, we'll have a whole team of staff that are going to travel out to Oregon to help with the capture and working with the helicopter crews and all the processing. And then we'll get the animals back, and I hope to be part of that initial effort of releases. There's obviously lots of people that want to be involved and have that photo opportunity and just that own personal opportunity to be part of that. And it's a really challenging conversation. There have been so many people that have been so instrumental and influential in development of this plan that fortunately that's not a decision that I have to make. That's somebody that our director or somebody higher than that has to make those decisions as to who participates and what. But I'll be part of those releases and then back to the field and capturing the next round of wolves and bringing them back to Colorado.
Nice. I only have two more questions. And so you were just mentioning how in the plan hunting is not mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason not to introduce the idea of lethal management in the future is not because CPW is necessarily against having the discussion at some point. It's the idea that I guess it should be had in the future, not muddying up the current goal, which is reintroduction, and having the chance to define what success looks like in good timing before the conversation of lethal management is ever entertained. Is that kind of define it?
Yeah, more or less. But I want to correct one. The words matter, and so it's important. You said that lethal management, and there is lethal management considered in this plan, right? Those really, really limited circumstances where there is livestock conflict. There are circumstances where we'll consider lethal management. What we do not consider is any kind of a regulated hunting season. And so, in your rationale is exactly right. I mean, there in the initial draft that was presented to the commission in December of 22. There was a fourth phase. Yeah, after that downlisting, delisting,
Right.
then there was a fourth phase of regulated hunting, and the commission very clearly said, no, it's not appropriate to have that conversation right now. So take that out, and we did, and I think that's probably a wise decision for us at this point as we're in this establishment phase.
Right. And my last question was, we keep kind of talking about this lynx reintroduction. I think people are probably wondering how. And I know this is off topic from wolves, but how is that doing now? How are lynx numbers doing?
Yeah, we get that question a lot. Lynx are really hard to monitor. They're so secretive. They're not pack animals, so we don't have really good numbers, population estimates for how they're doing. But we've done really extensive for the last many years, really extensive camera trap surveys, and so we've got hundreds of cameras deployed all around the southwestern part of the state. And even this year, we looked at all of western Colorado. We don't have those results in yet, but yeah, the population we think is at least stable, if not slightly increasing. And so it's a big success. We worked really hard to get that on and part of that.
There's a great photo of a few lynx on, I think they're just like on a road in I think Silverton, Colorado. Really cool photo. And then it's started coming up in our podcast recently. So I was just curious how that was going.
Yeah, no, it's a really neat program.
And what's actually piggybacking off that, when you capture the link or you release the links, is it a tag? Is it a call? What's the differentiate? Like, so you can't, do you track them or you can't track them? So there's no way to do that, or you just tag them. What's the way to monitor them, I guess, is the situation.
Well, when the links were released, this is one of the things that's changed over time. When links were released in that program was from 1999 through 2006. The technology that we're talking about for the wolf collars, this GPS technology, did not exist for lynx. And so they had just either a VHF collar, meaning you had to fly around in an airplane with telemetry and get the little ping as to where they were or be in the field, or there was this new kind of satellite collars that would give not a really precise location as to where they were, but like within a kilometer or two as to where they might be. And so we really use those collars to monitor more survival than really habitat use kinds of things. Are these animals still alive? We'd be able to know that. And so, um, yeah, that's how we would monitor those. With any kind of wildlife project, the more you handle animals, the more risk there is, right? The animal is certainly going to be better off from a stress perspective if you don't capture it, drug it, collar it, handle it, all that kind of work, re-release it, and all that. So we're switching to what we're calling these non-invasive methods. How can we kind of keep tabs on all these different species using non-invasive methods so we don't have to be capturing these animals. And that's what I was getting at with the trail cameras and some of the track surveys that we use, where we've got defined protocols for, ski X number of miles or snowmobile X number of miles. And if you cut across a lynx track, photograph, identify it, and then we can use that and through some pretty sophisticated computer modeling, come up with population estimates for occupancy estimates for how that population is doing.
What a cool looking animal. If I saw one of those in the woods, man, it'd be like, God, you'd think you're in Narnia. They're such a beautiful animal.
People send reports of lynx to. I get to see some of those, and yeah, anybody that gets to see a lynx in the wild is a lucky individual for sure.
Unreal.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I always say about, like, if I ever saw a wolverine in the wild, that would be like that's like the other thing. I'd love to see wolverines.
Well, hold on, that's the next one. That's what's coming next.
That's awesome. That'd be so cool. Are you looking with wolves, Eric? Are you looking at those non-invasive? Because you were just saying about lynx. Is that something that you guys are looking to do more of, the non-invasive tracking with wolves, or is there? I'm sure there's still going to be instances where you're going to need to dart, drug, and do, anatomical, teeth and everything like that. But are you looking to do more non-invasive in Colorado as opposed to some of the other initial states that do a lot of darting and netting and things like that?
Yeah. And I don't mean to give the impression that other states have a really active capturing operation at all. I mean,
not at all.
It's super expensive. You're paying lots of thousands of dollars an hour of helicopter time and all the risk to pilots and biologists and all that kind of stuff. And so, absolutely, the idea of trying to monitor a wolf population using non-invasive methods is very, very key, and we will be developing that. We're taking advantage of all the animals that we're reintroducing are going to be handled, and so we might as well have to put a collar on those.
Of course,
the expectation that every wolf or even every pack will have collars on it is going to be that's a challenge. Montana's not able to keep a collar on every pack, and so that's years down the road. We will have an active collaring operation to inform us as the population grows, but long term, for sure, there's all kinds of ways to do these non-invasive methods, and whether it's track counts or howling surveys or photo, trail cameras, all these different kinds of methods, and some that are we probably can't even imagine yet, that the technology will change and be able to help us out in a lot of different ways. And kind of an example of that with the lynx program as a non-invasive method, we in those track surveys will, in the wintertime, we'll collect the snow underneath a footprint. We can melt that out, filter it out, take it to the lab and do some analyses on that snow, and we can get genetic results. As the lynx is leaving that track, they're also shedding some skin cells into that snow, and those are retained. We can use that and do this, we call environmental DNA or eDNA work that we're doing to identify species, not necessarily individuals, but those kinds of techniques, and the technology of science is increasing rapidly in providing all kinds of new tools to use for this kind of non-invasive methodologies.
That is so cool. That is really, really awesome. So give everybody obviously where they can find all the updates, all the research, where can they see everything that's happening from now until the first wolves are on the ground, and obviously future research. Where can they go to find all that wonderful information out?
Yeah, our state website is let me find out exactly what it is. I want to be sure to give it to you. cpw.state.co.us. That's our main webpage. Or if you just Google Colorado Parks and Wildlife, it will come up to our gray wolf page is maintained there. We've got some really capable web people that are constantly updating it with updated FAQs and information and documents. Our wolf plan is available there. The wolf resource guide is the name of the document that I couldn't remember earlier on. That's the kind of shopping list of all of the different tools to use for conflict minimization. We borrowed that with permission from Montana and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and others too. So yeah, there's lots of really great information, but it's the Colorado Parks and Wildlife homepage is our primary source, and you'll easily find the wolf page on that.
That's awesome. Last question, Eric, is when you hear the word wolf, what's the thing that comes to your mind?
It's been a lot of work. Wolf to me means work these days, and so it's it's been like I said, 3 years of a lot of excitement, a lot of learning, and yeah, it's been a pretty big honor to be part of this program.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep doing the work, man. Just stick around with us for just a minute when we sign off here. But Eric Odell, thank you so much. Really, really informative. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks to both of you guys. Thanks for the interest.
Of course. How's to you all out there. Stephen, I'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.